But you make these comments. Let me say, you say Tennyson knocks out Gervonta Davis.
Yeah.
Tennyson's, I believe, is retired.
Yeah, he's retired.
Yeah, he's retired.
So I said to you, the top of my game, I'd beat Usyk. I have no shame in standing by that. I don't care if people say you wouldn't have. I think I would have. You know, we will never know. So I can say as much as I want. And if it winds people up, so what? At the top of my game, I believe that. And if you know you're boxing, come argue with me. If you don't know you're boxing, don't waste your time. You know, and that's it. Tennyson, what I said about Tennyson, I said, with that kind of power, if he touches my man on his chin, he's gone. And it's he's going to beat him up, go out and deal with him. I'm thinking, if you're a fighter and you can land them kind of shots on somebody, you're going to knock him out. I'm not saying he would have done, I'm just saying he had that power to do it. That's it. If I'm saying things like that, the devil's in the detail. Don't jump on the clickbait.
Not clickbait, but you've got a history of saying things, bizarre things.
Bizarre.
There's actually a parody account on Twitter. Is that actually you?
Probably.
Hey, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport, where a few boxers survived the Monaco departure lounge this weekend, and probably by the skin of their teeth, if we're being honest. Sometimes I pause and I go, what is the actual point of these Monaco shows? So if you think about it, right, Monaco's not really the kind of place you're going to grow boxing. You're just not. Yeah, it's a small country full of very wealthy people who aren't there half the time, but it has tax advantages that mean that it's worth having a residence there. Okay. We know there are rumors that Hearn has relocated to Monaco for tax reasons, and maybe that might be ahead of a Matchroom sale. No idea. But we know that he has a presence there. So maybe these shows were a way of ingratiating himself with the powers that be in Monaco, paving the way for his eventual relocation. Who knows? Would like someone at the stomping ground to ask those sorts of questions. So these shows have historically been the kind of departure lounge for Matchroom fighters. So I'll call them, it's almost like show and prove Saturday, right? Anyone Hearn's got questions about, like, do I need to invest in you next year? You go to Monaco to justify your existence. That's what you do. That's what the Monaco shows are there for. Because I don't think it costs Matchroom anything. They just organize the show. There are plenty of rich people that will buy tables to watch. Don't worry about that, right? There's no problem making money in Monaco. So you're going to earn a decent chunk of change, etc., right? It's fine. You know, you go to Monaco and, you go there, and for Eddie Hearn, that must be such a reality check, because you got to think, Hearn drives around in the same Rolls Royce he's had for a minute. 79 EH. Is that the number plate? I think it is. And so he drives around in this, and you got to think, you go to Monaco. I don't know if anyone's been to Monaco. Monaco will have cars that rich people said to Ferrari, can you make that for me? I know you don't sell it, but can you make that for me? Can you give me, look, just give me the chassis and the inner workings of, I don't know, I'll pick a car at random, of the Enzo, but I want different coach work on it. Okay, so that'll be $10 million. Fine. That's way out of my league. That's way out of Eddie Hearn's league. Those sorts of guys there, and you'll see them. They'll drive around in like James Dean's Porsche that he crashed. It's like, yeah, I had it restored. Now I drive it. Or who knows, man? They might have like a Paul Newman, one of them OG Le Mans cars, with the Gulf livery. They'll just drive that casually because it's nothing to them. So apart from tax advantages, why would he be there when he's just a very, very small fish in that pond? But he has access to royalty because he provides entertainment to the court. This is Shakespearean. And so this whole thing kind of is where his life, his career all kind of merged together, because who'd want to live in Monaco? Like, it's not a whole gang of fun. Like, it's rich people, scammers, and hookers. That's pretty much it. So maybe it does work for boxing, having thought about it. But on that point, so the build up to this is, it's the week after Big Boss Ben's BBC debut. So BBC Ben has done his thing now, right? And Frank Smith is definitely one of the guys to really jump on him and, you know, wish him all the harm on earth. To be fair, I kind of stuck it to him a bit in my pod, but that was a call to arms, like, yo, time to step up, if you know what I mean. Right? So you've got the build-up, and the build-up's really about, you know, Johnny Fisher. You know, has he got it? The whole Tony Sims thing. You know, if this doesn't work for Johnny Fisher, what next? You know, there's some side conversations, and I thought Eddie was quite disrespectful, actually, about the prospect of Dave fighting Jamie TKV. All that nonsense he was talking about Dave selling 9,000 tickets. Where? If Dave Allen sold 9,000 tickets, let's be real here. If Dave Allen sold 9,000 tickets, he ain't doing an 8-rounder in Nottingham. I promise you that. If David Allen sold 9,000 tickets, they'd be having him headline every month in Sheffield. You know what I mean? So to try and clown Ben Shalom for saying economically we could make the fight with Dave Allen, yeah, they don't pay Dave Allen £500,000 per fight. They really don't. I doubt they pay him £250,000 per fight. They just pay Dave what he can, because Dave doesn't have many options. So there's all this whole build-up, and this is back and forth, and, you know, Hearn's trying to make out, you know, when I take Ben, it's a bit of fun, but Nick Khan at TKO is a scarier beast than Ben Shalom. And it's like, well, okay, but you seem to devote a lot of time to Ben Shalom. So if you're doing it for the fans, then it's fake beef, as Coogan would say. And if you're not doing it for the fans, then yeah, this kid's really got under your skin. He's definitely got under Frank Smith's skin. And why those two? In that situation, those two just need to come head to head and knuckle up. Just see who the better man is out of those two. And then there's also the side subject of Eubank Jr. So here's my understanding of it. And we're going to come to the fights in a second. Here's my understanding of it. Frank Smith and Emily Eubank are in a relationship. Frank seems to have business interests in Brighton, where she's from. So I imagine there's something there. So for Frank to act like he didn't know Eubank was sick points to something that says, is there dysfunction in the Eubank family, or are these guys just being stupid? How can Eubank Jr. be posting videos of himself in the hospital and we're all acting like Frank Smith is seeing this for the first time? Because if he is, then he has unbelievably big problems in his private life, okay? And the way they were just like, well, it's the fighter's responsibility. It's like, well, he's potentially your brother-in-law. What do you mean? What do you mean? You're with a woman who lost her brother Sebastian to a heart attack in Dubai. So if these Eubank illness things are real, I imagine that's quite triggering for her, which should be quite triggering for you, and definitely not something you should be making light of, is my opinion, which leads me to my real conclusion, which is actually they're all in on it. The Eubank Hearn thing is just a soap opera that they use whenever they need to make money. That's my take on it. I don't think there's dislike between the Hearns and the Eubanks. I think it's like, you know, two warring families, right? And you can always make money off that tension. You can always get attention off of that. And if that's the case, like I said, it just goes to show the depths to which some people will think to take money out of hardworking men and women. Just my take on it. So they're the main stories going into this. But you look at the card at first glance, and it's really like the entrails. It's like the Matchroom entrails, stuff they don't really care about. You go into a butcher's, you got top side, you got silver side, you got rump, you got sirloin, you got the picanha, you got, you know, nice fine cuts of meat that you can fry and grill well. You know, you got brisket that you can smoke. And then you got kind of like chuck steak or the entrails, you know, like, I don't even know, just the bits of the cow foot, like stuff like that where you're like, you know, just they're not so good bits. Now, sometimes you can turn those into cool stuff. Oxtail's a prime example. Ox cheek is another example. Sometimes you can. But this is Matchroom, so it's mostly just the guts and the kidneys and the liver, and the pancreas, and, you know, all the sort of stuff that you feed to the foxes. Now, luckily, you've got an audience that's far too rich to ever check box rec. So to them, it's It's the Colosseum, it's gladiators, it's people just smashing heads into each other. You're like, okay, cool. You know, these guys are just sat there. Meanwhile, they are literally the people in that audience that make money while they do nothing, right? So they're okay, they're good. So you end up with a card, and I'm trying to think who was on there off the top of my head. Not even off the top of my head, because I should know this stuff. So you got Johnny Fisher versus Ivan, whatever, I can't even remember his surname. Beatrice Ferreira versus the Turkish lady, Turhan. McCormack versus Conor Walker. Hugo Mikhaev against Sean McComb. You got Shabazz Maverick Masood against Peter McGrail. Look, if I've forgotten someone, I'm going to come on to them anyway. But I wanted to start with Johnny Fisher, because obviously his original opponent, Soup Can number 1, pulled out for visa issues. Didn't know he needed a visa to go to Monaco. But maybe you need a visa to go to France and then drive to Monaco. I have no idea. So much for the Schengen visa. So basically, they replaced this guy with a Slovakian stonemason, right? Guy's probably had a hard day at work, got bills to pay, Europe's ever-increasing energy prices. And he's like, I'll fight this Johnny Fisher kid. He can't be up to much. University student, 2-1 and all that. So that's the fight. And really, if Johnny can't beat this guy, then you just got to quit. Got to quit. You got to quit, because it ain't for you. But my working theory is it's not for him anyway. And I'm not saying that to disrespect Johnny Fisher. Johnny Fisher's a lovely kid, okay? Nice kid. People speak highly of him. Look, if I had a beer with him, I'd speak highly of him. But he's a kid who had to get really good A-levels to get into Exeter. Do you know what I mean? You don't get in with C's and D's. And he went to study history, so it's a prestigious degree. He got a 2-1. So this is a kid who's in the books. He's never alluded to anything, not scrapping at school, not doing nothing. He's always alluded to being a good kid from a good family. And credit to Big John Barsh for doing that, right? Credit to Big John for raising a good young man. Boxing is not a haven. Professional boxing is not a haven for good young men. It's not a haven for lads with 2-1 degrees from Russell Group universities. Professional boxing is not a haven for young lads that were in the rugby team with dudes from Wellington College. And actually, if you look at his phone book and his group chats, it's all lads who are working for Goldman Sachs, Deloitte, McKinsey, Bain, some helping daddy with his business, some doing private banking. That's his group chat, okay? That's not Derek Chisora's group chat. That's not Courtney Bennett's group chat. That's not Jamie TKV's group chat. It's not Dave Allen's group chat. So Johnny Fisher's always going to be in that position that everyone that jumps in the ring with him sees through him. And this is the beautiful thing about heavyweights. It's the purest form of combat, because it's really about this. Who's the biggest dog in the yard? And big men know which other big men are really big men and who are just big lumps. There is a big difference. And you see it with Lennox Lewis. What does Lennox do every time he's in a room full of other heavyweights? He gets to the middle of the picture, because his attitude is this: since Muhammad Ali passed away, I'm top dog now. And because George has passed away and Joe Frazier, Lennox is like, I'm the top dog now. Historically, I'm the benchmark of heavyweights now. Of everyone living, I'm the benchmark. I stand right in the middle here. If Vander can stand next to me, yeah, Usyk can stand next to me, and the rest of you work it out. Because Lennox is truly a big man. Yeah, imposes himself, imposes his size on people of a similar size. I don't think Johnny Fisher's got that in him. And this was shown in the fight. So early part of the fight, Johnny Fisher goes in like proper Romford Bull. Romford Bull, steaming in, thinking he's going to blast this guy. Now, was that nerves? Was it fear? Probably a bit of both. But he gets clipped. And the ref doesn't rule it a knockdown, but you can see it's got him. And this is how you knew it had got him. What's the first thing Johnny Fisher does as soon as the ref says box on? He runs over to Ivan. And honestly, it was I've just been watching the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup in the rugby. They would have been proud of the way Johnny was just flying in, flat back. Yeah, back was parallel to the ring, and he flew straight into the guy, just wrapped his arms around him. Didn't feint a jab, didn't do anything, just ran into him. And they'll tell you that's really good thinking. That should have been a point deduction immediately. So the ref breaks it up, he does it again. And this guy can't punch, by the way. His opponent can't punch. Can you imagine Johnny jumping in with a Chisora, even a 40-something-year-old Chisora? He ain't going to let you do that. And so from round 1 to about round 3, Johnny Fisher's all over the place. And if you're her and you're watching this going, if I can get a British title out of this guy, I've done well. Like, you're literally trying to make miracles happen with this guy because he's out of his depth. He's out of his depth. If he can't bully you, he's out of his depth. And then in round 4, interestingly enough, he hits the kid, pushes him over, it's ruled a knockdown, although when it happened to him, it was ruled a slip. But to be fair, he got him. So let's not pretend otherwise. He got him and got him good. And then it's a slow ending decline after that. Drops him again, and the ref's like, it's over. And it was a fight that told us absolutely nothing on a card that wasn't meant to tell us anything other than, do you get to dance again in 2026 for Matchroom? Yes, no. The answer for Johnny Fisher is he gets another go. But I don't think Hearn wants to waste too much more money on him unless he can keep selling tickets. Now, they talk about Dave Allen selling 9,000 tickets. I would believe Johnny Fisher could sell 9,000 tickets. But at some point, those people in Essex who claim to know boxing have to look at Johnny Fisher and go, this ain't the guy. And look, Johnny Fisher's been honest, right? He said, I'm just here to entertain. I don't know what my ceiling is. Maybe this is my ceiling. Maybe it's British level. Who knows? I'm here to entertain. And if you're entertained by me, you'll follow me. If you're not, you won't. That very matter of factness is the reason he won't go anywhere in boxing. He's too rational. He thinks. Boxers don't think. Big men definitely don't think when it comes to boxing. He's too thoughtful. Too thoughtful, too introspective. And if you watch this fight, it's almost like he just watched Conor Benn train and said, I'm going to do what Conor does. Because it was just those wild looping shots. There wasn't really any structure to what he was doing. He was just sort of biding his time and then just letting a big right hand go. And then it was kind of this weird kind of hook come uppercut that he'd throw. And he missed it a couple of times. And it actually came out the other side of the guy. And so you actually got to learn to throw these shots. But that's not going to help him because he's a guy that says, look, in the second Dave Allen fight, I wasn't myself. And I thought this was quite disrespectful to Mark Tibbs, actually. You know, how dare you say that to Mark, who took time out, you know, for measly 10% that he doesn't need, if we're being honest. But he does that to help you grow and develop, and you applied none of the stuff he taught you. And then you say, oh, well, you know, being in Tony Simmons' environment is a completely different environment. You can't middle finger your previous trainer like that because you stayed with him after the first Dave Allen debacle. And then he gave you something different. Now you're complaining that he gave you something different and what you wanted to be was the guy in the first Dave Allen fight. And I don't think he understood the difference between those two fights. In the first fight, Dave was like, do I really believe in myself? In the second fight, and Dave said, I'm going to knock him out. There's nothing he can do. Dave Allen said this. He says, there's nothing he can do. There is nothing he can learn that will stop him getting knocked out. And as soon as Dave decided to knock him out, he knocked him out. He hasn't taken the lesson from that. When you pal up with a guy that beat the life out of you and dropped you, you start palling up with him. And then the second time he drops you, you're sat there having Five Guys burgers with him. You've got to know at that point that no heavyweight respects you. And when they don't respect you, they're going to come for you. And that's going to be Johnny Fisher's problem, is that there's a big target on his back because he's a big scalp to take now. And like I said, he's a nice kid that really should be somewhere like PwC, Deloitte, I don't know, maybe Barclays Bank as a chief of staff. That's what he should be. Insurance broker, because he seems like a cheerful chap. Why not? But boxing heavyweights is not for him, man. And not for you, Manolo. And not for you, man. Do you know what I mean? It's just not for him. So we'll see what he does next. I don't know. Like I would park any talk of British level, man. He needs to fight some of these English level guys, your Solly Dakers, etc. He needs to get in with them and see what he's about. I can see them putting him in with like a Jordan Thompson and then like loser leaves town sort of situation, because you can't have both of those guys flattering to deceive, right? So I can see those two jumping in with each other. But I really want to talk about my favorite fight of the night. I didn't think Beatrice Ferreira versus is it Elif or Elfin Nur Turhan would catch fire like it did. I love Turhan's style. I love it because it applies every principle of boxing well without any of the techniques you're usually taught. So she's almost impossible to defend against because you're not taught to defend against someone who boxes that way. I think she's brilliant. Oh my God. And look, I like Shauna Brown. I think Shauna Brown's a lovely lady. Met Shauna Brown before. For the record, maybe the hardest physique like ever. Like, you know when you hug someone and there's like no give, and you're like, I think she could stop a bullet with her flesh. But when I saw her get done with that left hook, like cleaned out with that left hook, I was like, oh, who is this? And then you kind of think, oh, you know, it's luck. Yeah, then you go and do your research. Like, no, this is how she boxes. So Beatrice Ferreira, with her Olympic pedigree and, you know, world level fights and and all the stuff that Hearn likes to tell you. And remember when Hearn was telling us Beatrice Ferreira was a problem for Caroline Dubois, and you were just like, really? I'm not so sure about that. I'm really not sure about that. So anyway, this was the chance to find out, right? If you beat Turhan, you're in line to fight a Caroline Dubois, who's now a free agent. We might come into that later, or have I touched on that? Now, if Turhan wins, she becomes a viable option for Caroline Dubois. And Hearn unleashes a new star and opens a new market, because people forget how big Turkey is and how many Turks there are. That means you can do shows in Germany, you can do shows in the UK, you can do the shows. I mean, there's large Turkish communities in so many places. So the fight starts, and Ferreira's boxing composed. She's doing what she normally does. You know, they were praising her footwork, but it was like, she's just doing the basics. And then Turhan let her know what time it was. Big right hand comes, big left hook, big right hand. They initially missed, but you're like, oh, this is what it's going to be. And here's where Turhan is a problem. She doesn't do the in and out, in and out. Once she goes, she goes. And you're just going to have to deal with 4 or 5 shots thrown with bad intentions, which means you got to be on your P's and Q's. Like, you can't be anything less than your best against her. And she's just letting them go. And there was, you know, like, I forgot, man. Let's talk about the ref. Broadly speaking, I'm happy to see women referees in women's bouts. I think that's brilliant. That is what we need in boxing. I think there should be an all-female ecosystem for women's boxing. There should be women trainers. There should be women managers. There should be women promoters in time. I expect to see that. But there should be women officials, women referees, etc., women judges. They should be. I'm 100% on board with the fact that there's a whole ecosystem for women's boxing. I support that. And I also think we should keep them out of men's boxing. I think that's also a sensible idea, because if you have women coming into men's boxing, what you're really saying is the men's version is superior. That's the high watermark, and that sends the wrong message out. So I think you need to keep them segregated and allow women the opportunity to build a viable female boxing market and a viable female boxing ecosystem. 100% on board with that. Now, where the IBF found this woman to be the ref is beyond me, because I don't know if she's ever boxed or done anything before. I don't know if she's ever trained, ever been. They may have just found her. Okay, they may have just found her being a croupier in the casino and said, "Can you fit in this shirt? Cool. Here's what you need to do." She pulls the fighters in before the fight to do the usual, you know, belt line is cool, yada yada yada. And she goes into this mad speech, and she's talking about world hunger, peace, the future of Ukraine, whether Russia will go to Odessa talking about the decline in living standards in Europe and how that's down to people coming in off boats. She goes into this long diatribe. She's blaming Infantino for being corrupt at FIFA, wishing Platini was back. This long thing where you're like, Diamante's arm, right? His arm had rigor mortis from just being there, like, and he's looking at her like, bitch, just get it done. And she's there like, I'm on TV, yay! So anyway, like, you think it's not going to get any worse for the ref. She's going to do her job and it's going to be brilliant, right? I think it was it the first round or the second round? Turhan just lands his big right hand on Ferreira. So basically what Ferreira sussed out, so Ferreira's clearly watched Turhan and gone, I need to react off the left hook, right? So as soon as she hooks, I hook. And so now she's done that with no follow-up. So as she's thrown her hook, Turhan's gone, okay, cool, there's a right hand coming. And as Ferreira's turning in to throw her hook, she gets clocked with a right hand, which drops her. Ref's like, that's not a knockdown. And you're like, no. That's a knockdown. And Ferreira needs the 8 count to pull herself together. Don't tell her to get up. Like she wants you to count. You know when Ferreira's just like, just count. And she's almost looking at the ref like, why aren't you counting? So anyway, so the ref's like, carry on, right? And Ferreira's a bit dazed at this point, like, fuck, could have done with the count, really? And then Turhan goes back in again. Same punch sequence, same outcome, drops her again. Ferreira's like, I fucking told you. I told you I needed that count. And I imagine Ferreira was down there just screaming, count! And now she gets the count, right? And then at that point, Turhan's like, I'm teeing off. And there's a point in that round where she's got Ferreira in the corner. This is terrible refereeing, by the way. And Ferreira's out. But because Turhan's throwing so many punches and is so close to her, Ferreira can't fall forwards, can't fall to the side because she's trapped. And there's probably about 3 shots in was the time to stop the fight. So Turhan's like, well, Shane, Turhan's almost like, you're not going to stop this? Cool. Just bag work. She's just treating Ferreira like a punch bag. In the end, Ferreira just collapses in on herself because there's nothing else to do, right? She's just dropped down. And the ref's counting. And now Ferreira's like, at this point, I'd rather you didn't count. Just stop fucking counting and end the fight. Ferreira gets up, ref's counting. Ref looks and goes, it's almost like the ref's looking at her like, do I have to stop the fight now? And Ferreira's like, yes, kind of stop the fight now. Where the fuck did they find this referee? And so, really entertaining fight. I love Turhan. Do not change a thing about how you box. It's a bit like Wilder. When you're that unorthodox and unpredictable, it's very hard to defend against because boxing defense is a mental model. People assume you're just defending in the moment. You're not. You've got pre-trained structures that you use. If you don't have pre-trained structures for Elfin Turhan, Renur Turhan, whatever her name is, then you're screwed. Yeah, because 1, you're not going to be able to read her punches. 2, she just keeps throwing. And then nasty shots. Hearn was calling her the hardest puncher in women's boxing. I'm like, I think Karis Artingstall would argue against that strongly. I think Caroline Dubois would argue against that strongly. But, hey, you keep believing what you want to believe. But no, I do like her. I would happily watch her fight anybody. Yeah, but don't care if she wins, don't care if she loses. As long as she just... That gunslinging approach is just fun. 2-minute rounds as well. That's just fun. Whack her in with Katie Taylor. Yeah, I mean, let's see what Katie does with that kind of pressure. Do you know what I mean? But no, I thought that was a great fight. So the next fight we're going to talk about is Pat McCormack versus Conor Walker. Now, shout out to Curtis Woodhouse and I go back and forth on this all the time, where every time a GB guy falls, like when Fraser lost, it's like, I told you. And he's not wrong. But there's a real issue with our GB system. Because you're paid so well, you're looked after, like you really have no running costs for all the time you're on GB. 2 things happen. 1, the incentive to go pro kind of disappears, right? And 2, you get lazy because you're so pampered, as Chris Waddle would say. Pampered. Right? You're so pampered at GB that you don't, how do you put it? You don't need any kind of fire. You just need to do as they tell you, go where they tell you to go, and you're all good, right? That's the thing. Now look, let me just come back to this. Like, that GB system is too good for some guys. Look, Fraser Clark was in that system for what, a decade? Over a decade. He was able to stabilize his life. I think a lot of them bought houses and were able to do that because accommodation was paid for most of the time, and they got sponsored cars, etc. They lived a good life. So where was the hunger? And you see this in a lot of these guys that have come out, right? You know, the guys that did double Olympic camps like Yafai, etc. Just not tough. And the reason they're not tough is the same with anything. When all you're exposed to are people like you, so good amateurs who haven't really shown their toughness, and then all you ever do is go on camps with people who are just like you. You've boxed in tournaments full of people who are just like you. There's no incentive to change. Whereas if you look at like what I call our grassroots boxers, the kids who just come up, at some point they got to go into a gym and they got to spar a pro. Do you know what I mean? At some point you got to jump in with an Anthony Yard, a Joshua Boatsi, a Jermaine Brown. You've got to do rounds with these guys. They might even come into your gym for some rounds. And at that point, you feel the difference. And you understand that there's a point you need to get to physically and psychologically where you're all good with that. I feel Conor Walker's done that. It's not like Conor Walker was a terrible amateur. Good enough. Like, definitely appearing in the latter stages of national tournaments. So Conor Walker is a guy who can box. But he's had to dirt track it through his career. Whereas I think Pat McCormack's had it laid out for him. Despite all the stuff that happened outside the ring and his behavior, him and his brother's behaviors outside the ring are well known, and they were indulged because it was felt that they would bring us medals at whatever Olympics they participated in, right? 2016, it didn't matter. And here's where they differ from like a Ben Whittaker, who's the generation after them, right? But here's where they differ. Ben, you never heard anything. Like, I had guys who were in GB with Ben say, yo, what's Ben really like? Yeah, he's a good kid, man. Yeah, he's a good kid. He's not on no street, nothing. No. He doesn't cause drama. He takes it seriously. He's focused. And people spoke highly of Ben that were in the GB setup with him. Spoke really highly of Ben, which is always a good signal. The McCormacks, people just like, eee. But it was indulged. Ironically, McCracken was brought in to bring discipline to GB. And once again, shown that, you know, they'll bend over backwards to get the medals. Did it with Joshua, had to do it a few times with the McCormacks. And so that's what you're essentially dealing with, right? A kid who's kind of been pampered his whole life. And I've watched him. Remember, this guy's from the same generation as Ted Cheeseman. Like, they were rivals coming up. Do you know what I mean? Who's the real guy? Is it the guy from London or the guy from the Northeast? And if you look, Ted's had an amateur career, a pro career, been out the sport, set up a bar somewhere, done his own thing in the time that it's taken McCormack to get here. Like, Ted's been in with guys like Carson Jones already. Pat McCormack hasn't. So what are the odds of McCormack learning to be tough at this age now? I say somewhere between slim and none. I don't believe he can. And so for all the technique, and he's a great boxer, by the way, really, really good boxer. He's not from that. Conor Walker was. And it wasn't like Walker was winning the fight, but he kept himself in the fight. The difference was Conor Walker kept himself in the fight, and that's attitude, and that's character, that's resilience. You know, that's class. Just good grit, good old grit got him a long way. And while he was behind on the scorecards, going into that last round was really interesting because you can go and watch it back on, I think it's on the DAZN YouTube channel. There's a point in that 12th round where you see McCormack break mentally, in my opinion. And he goes to push out his mouth guard like he was going to spit it out. And you can see it. His white mouth guard comes out. And then he kind of puts it back in and is like, no, right? And then the pressure comes back on, and then he's like, fuck it. He spits it out. And he thinks that's buying him time. But because he's broken mentally, and you can watch it, he breaks mentally, and he's like, I can't be in here with this guy. He gave Conor Walker a chance to pause, collect his thoughts, listen to any signals or instructions from his corner. So are they telling him, look, jump on him now, right? And if they did, well done. But he had a chance to recharge and refocus, and he came back with a different punching approach. He was more accurate, more considered in his punches, and eventually punches McCormack out through the ropes. You know me and my thing about these kind of the rope stays, the things that are meant to hold the ropes together. They always end up too close to the middle of the ring, and I think the ref's job between rounds is to make sure they're in the right place so people don't fall out the ring. Otherwise, what's the point in having them? But here's my point. If McCormack doesn't spit out his gum shield, I think he wins the fight. I think he survives to the end and wins the fight. But because he spat it out, Conor Walker didn't have a chance to punch himself out because he got a chance to get a mid-round break and then come back with a new focus and saying, look, it's now or never. And McCormack didn't have the toughness, didn't have the nous, didn't have the common sense to hold on or kid himself through the round, didn't know how to communicate to the referee to present, a picture of strength. And in the end, look, Ben Davison looked at him and said, mate, you're done. And that might be it. Like we talked about Monaco being the departure lounge. I think for McCormack, that's kind of it. Like you're not getting a world title like Pat McCormack. You might get like an Echo Esserman fight. You might get, a Harry Scarf fight out of him. If he needs to go up in weight, you might get a Sam Antwi fight out of him. But I think those guys will hurt him. These were guys he was better than in the amateurs by a long way. But they're not tough. And this brings me back to the bigger picture, right? And the bigger picture is this. We need a system in the United Kingdom that gets young amateurs exposure to tough, grizzled veterans who will show them where the bar is, what the standards are, where the levels are. Because without that, we're just going to produce loads of really nice kids. Kind of like we do in rugby. We produce those really nice kids that aren't streetwise, that aren't really that tough. And we pay for it when the pressure comes on. And I think we need to look at what we're doing. And I've proposed for a long time a tiering system for boxing clubs. Yeah, there should be tier 3s, tier 2s, and tier 1s. Tier 1s are your West Hams, your Reptons, your Pinewood Stars, your Rotundas, your Bertleys, maybe Bermontoft. That feels like a level 2. Clubs, the Solly. Clubs that every year are in the meaty end of tournaments. Every year. They're your tier 1s, right? Like, they're your Champions League clubs. Your tier 2s are the level below that where they're normally in the mix up until the quarters, and then the guys drop out. But they've got a few champions. In London, I think of clubs like South Norwood and Victory. Finchley, I'd put in that category as well. All Stars. If you look outside of London, you're looking at clubs like Empire out in Bristol, Golden Ring in Southampton. You'd be looking at Sheffield Boxing Centre as well. There's a few of them that will be in that level. Then there's tier 3, which is just your community clubs, where people come to enjoy boxing, have a few bouts, but you're not going to see them on the Roll of Honor at any point in the near future. And that doesn't mean they won't get there one day, but for now, they're community clubs that need to build up. And what that would do is people would know what club they were in. And if they felt they were too good for a tier 3, they go to a tier 2. Too good for a tier 2, go to a tier 1. And you'd have a concentration of talent. That meant that you're really, really mixing with the best. But you still need that development that says these guys need to be around pros if they want to be pros. Like a proper apprenticeship. And that's the bit we need to fix as well. And at this point, I know I'm going to get a message from Curtis. So I'm going to preempt the message by saying, whatever solution we come up with as a sport, it needs to be scalable. If you give me like 3 fighters, I can drive them around the country and get them sparring and train them and do all of that sort of stuff. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's doable. Okay? Do you know what's not doable? Doing that with 10 to 15. And I think you need 10 to 15 to get down to the 2 or 3 who are going to make it. So whatever solution you have needs to be scalable. It needs to do these things. Enable the kids to master the fundamentals. Enable the kids to compete, but enable the kids to understand where all the various levels are. And it has to do that at scale. It can't just be by exception. And when we get a system that does those things, we'll be all good. The Americans seem to have it pretty down pat. And I don't know if we necessarily want to learn from them, but maybe we do. But in America, they travel. In the UK, we do not travel. We're the size of an American state, and we don't travel within the UK. And those guys are traveling from state to state to get the right kind of work and the right kind of development. Look at Devin Haney. Devin Haney's an example. Floyd Mayweather from Grand Rapids to Vegas. Sean Porter from Ohio to Vegas. And look at the guy who didn't do it. Tank Davis stayed in Baltimore, and look at what's happened to his life. Sometimes you've got to take yourself out of your comfort zone in order to grow. And I think that's what Pat McCormack didn't do. And so one of the rarest talents we produced in this country probably sat on the shelf now. Hearn's like, there's only so much I can invest in this guy. He's definitely not a guy I can take all over the world like I'm going to do with Ben Whittaker. And that's because when the lights came on, Pat just didn't produce. So we're going to talk about Shabazz Masood versus Peter McGrail. And look, I don't know what to make of both guys, right? If you look at Shabazz Masood, turn the sound off and everything looks brilliant. But it's all very repetitive. It's very much, he will always try and slide back and counter. The switch hit, all that stuff's great, but he's going to have a long career in terms of the rounds he boxes because he hasn't got that pop to take people out. But we don't even know if he does or not because we never really see him. We never see him commit to his shots. We don't see him plant his feet and dig in. It's not his style. And like he's almost what I would call like a karaoke boxer. Like someone can do Rick Astley's, never going to give you a butt for the record. How much did Travis look like Rick Astley when he was celebrating Conor Walker's win? And who was it that fell over the top rope? Was it Jamie Moore that tried to jump over the rope and then just fell over? Which I wish the zone had replayed that more often. But look, sidetrack. How do you put it? When people go on the X Factor and they sing that one song, Rick Astley, whatever, right? And it's amazing. And then you're like, okay, go and sing another song. And the gap between the two versions is like night and day. Shabazz Masood is a guy where you go, look, good boxers do all of these things, right? And Shabazz Masood would tick all of those boxes. And then you'd watch him and you go, he makes everything harder work than it needs to be. So I look at someone like him and contrast him with like an Abdullah Mason. Abdullah Mason has enough in him to hurt you, but he can do that boxing backwards thing all day. But he has enough to hurt you. I don't think Shabazz Masood has, and that's always going to be his downfall. Because guys will be walking him down. Peter McGrail should not have been able to walk him down like that without his face coming out bloodied and bruised. Peter McGrail had a decent time in there. And look, I'm not convinced that Peter McGrail's anywhere beyond British level. I think British level would be his limit. He's busy in the way that Liverpool boxers are, like really basic, no finesse, just busy. Busy, fit, strong, like Nick Ball. Similar stylistically as well, aren't they? Like in the way they throw some of their shots. There's a lot of elements there, but they're all from ERT, so that doesn't surprise me. This was a fight that did nothing for me. On reflection, it did nothing for me because there's two guys that I don't believe will go anywhere. Hearn was talking about Shabazz Masood against Inoue, and you're like, just stop, man. Like he's not there. He's not there. Do you know what I mean? There are a fair few British guys he might have to get, because what you're going to do with someone like McGrail is move him up to feather, right? That's where all the action is. So you're fighting your Zach Millers, but obviously not your Nick Balls, your Liam Davis, etc. All those guys. Even a lad like Baluta, just jump in there with him. But another example of Team GB just not having what it takes at even the most basic level. Like, think about this, right? If the Monaco show is the departure lounge, like, you got to prove your value here. McCormack didn't show his value. Thingy hasn't shown his value either. McGrail hasn't shown his value. And this is on top of all these guys like Callum French, Cyrus Pattinson, all these guys that have never shown that they're anything better than English/British level. So it's almost not worth approaching these GB kids anymore. Like, it's just not worth it. And there's a deeper thing as well of who are we recruiting for GB? We're recruiting people's pet projects. Do you know what I mean? We're recruiting people who could just get down for sparring because it's only at 50 minutes on the train. Like, we're not recruiting people where we're like, this person's got the raw materials to be a game-changing fighter. We don't do that anymore. You know what I mean? But let's just talk about the show. Last fight was Hugo Mikhaev, Monaco's very own, against Sean McComb. I thought Sean McComb boxed well. I get a hard time for not praising Irish fighters, but Sean McComb boxed beautifully. Lovely as a southpaw. Didn't put too much on the shots, was just super accurate and just efficient with them. Was pinging the kid all over the place. And you can see why Top Rank kind of washed their hands of Mikhaev a while ago. He's another guy who's just not tough enough for the sport. And I don't know if Monaco is the environment you go to get tough. He might need to join the French Foreign Legion for a bit, toughen himself up. But good win for McComb. You know, he escapes the departure lounge. I don't think Mikhaev does. I think there are a lot of guys who are going to have to convince Eddie Hearn on smaller shows, or maybe have to drop down to the small hall scene, because like that Monaco thing can be very brutal if you don't perform. Feel for Beatrice Ferreira as well. She's talking about she'll be back. I don't think she will be. I don't think there's anything in her that interests Hearn. I think he'll move on very quickly because he can just recycle people. He just get people on his platform. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's what he does. I don't know if anyone's caught up with Boxing King Media's kind of. He's having a generational run, isn't he? He gets the Usyk exclusive, forces Coogan to get on a plane and go, oh, I need to get some of that, right? And from what I hear from people who were on the ground there, Usyk does not F with Coogan at all. So if you look at the IFL version of their Usyk content, he's filming Usyk from the side, you know, like he's just another pair of eyes. There's no interview with Usyk, no discussion about Wilder. I don't even think Coogan's got an interview with Wilder. Is this how bad IFL are becoming now, where they have no status in the game? But credit to Boxing King Media, man. Generational run. I know Porky's going to be mad. You talking about PC Gully? That's a great nickname. I don't know why I wouldn't get offended by being called PC Gully. That's a great nickname. Like I'd literally just be like, hi, this is PC Gully on Boxing King Media. That would be me all over. That's just how I am. I lean into confrontation, don't I? But anyway, he's had this generational run, hasn't he? So he did Usyk. He dropped the exclusive on that. Goes out to Australia, does a great interview with Jai Opetaia. Like, you can see Opetaia struggling. And I remember thinking, Hearn was on Opetaia's nuts for ages. Like, you know, he gave us the full Hearn spiel about how Opetaia was going to be undisputed, this, that, and the other, and that Matchroom were backing him. Right, so you hear the interview and Opetaia's like, yo, man, I got to stay busy. I'm not getting the Matchroom love. Well, and then it turns out there's no relationship with Hearn. Hearn just uses their name when it's convenient and maybe offers them a couple of slots. But there is no relationship. So you got to look at that Matchroom stable. And if you really break it down by people that Hearn exclusively promotes, it's very, very weak. What he's been able to do is become like this outsourced hype man. That's really what he is. He's an outsourced hype man. Like, for boxers. He did it with Canelo. He did it with Devin Haney. And then Haney realized Hearn doesn't make big fights. Go and list them. Last 10 years. The biggest fights in the last 10 years. There's no Hearn name on there. Triple G versus Canelo. Hearn was not involved in that. Yeah, I don't know if he was still kind of tagging along. He might have just been tagging along, but he wasn't he wasn't a promoter on that. Tank versus Ryan Garcia wasn't a promoter on that. Like he's not. Hearn hasn't been involved in the seminal fights in the last 10 years. He just hasn't. And I know people say, yeah, but Joshua versus Klitschko, that was big here. To me, that was just big here, but that's not really the event. Do you know what I mean? Joshua versus Usyk, he wasn't seminal. That was Joshua looking for a way back in. I mean, we haven't had Hearn hasn't put together where it's a battle for number one. He just hasn't. And I don't think he's interested in that. He's interested in his matchroom valuation. That is all he cares about. He will lie. He will do whatever he needs to do, allegedly, to raise that valuation. He doesn't care about the fans. He doesn't care about anybody. Get the valuation up, sell the business, and then just stop caring about boxing. And it will turn out he doesn't care about boxing. And he'll tell you he fell out of love with boxing after the pandemic. I bet any money that's going to come at some point. So yeah, so no relationship with Opetaya. Got to start looking at all those relationships that he claims to have, like with Bivol, etc. He's just a middleman for hire. That's all Hearn is. He's a middleman for hire. He'll take his 2 or 3% and move on. And it's a shame because, like, look, Opetaya shouldn't be fighting guys like Sin Cara, who, as people are saying, is just a 40-year-old German. We want Opetaya in there with guys where it has meaning. But it looks like Hearn's in love with Pat Brown at the moment, and you definitely wouldn't put Pat Brown in with Joe Opetaya because Pat's still got to learn his trade. Although age-wise, there can't be much between them. And so that's what I'd say. Like, we've got to start looking at these things critically. The way Hearn digs people out while he's saying, look, I've conquered everywhere. You go, oh, stop for a second. Stop for 1 second. Saturday night, the Americans, I want to say PBC, are able to put on a show that's got Lamont Roach versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz, which is a hell of a fight. And then a showcase for Frank Martin against Rances Barthélemy. Matchroom could never do that. 2 fights that make perfect sense, by the way, right? We get a draw in one and a beautiful stoppage in another, right? They can't do that. You think, like, nominally PBC have been out of the game for how long, and they are still delivering. They don't have no Danny Garcia. They don't have Sean Porter. They don't have Errol Spencer, doesn't see. And they're still able to pull guys out the woodwork that deliver great cards and great events. Matchroom can't do that. So when Hearn says he took over America, he didn't. He's got a load of fighters in America no one else wanted. And now he's trying to tell you, oh, they're the most amazing things ever. They're not. And by the way, kudos to PBC for making it back. I think that show was on Amazon. And, you know, that's a really interesting play now, isn't it? That Amazon are getting into it. Netflix are getting into sport in a big way. I think the way we consume sport's about to change. And I think boxing will be part of that movement. And this is crisis time for DAZN. Because DAZN is meant to be the home of sport. But if these streaming giants want to get involved, then DAZN may as well sell themselves up and go, look, Netflix, buy us. And I think those conversations must be happening. It'll be insane if those conversations aren't happening. But that's what I'd say. Anything else you need to touch on? I think the American card was good. Lamont Roach versus Pitbull Cruz, run that back. I love Pitbull Cruz in the same way I love Nur Turhan, the Turkish lady. Pitbull doesn't work off a jab in the traditional sense. Like, he'll throw it sporadically at points where it doesn't make sense, but it allows him to, it's almost like a bridge between him just throwing wild, hard hooks. And I love the fact that he's mastered how to hook efficiently, like without making it look wild and disorganized. And as we said about Turhan before, very, very hard to come up with a defense against it. You almost have to fight fire with fire. And at that point, it's hard to look classy. That's why what Tank did deserves a bit more respect now. Because, like, he handled business properly. Now, whether we see Gervonta Davis in the ring again, look, I think at 135, there's a lot of action for him. I don't think he needs to move up anytime soon. Definitely doesn't need to touch 147. Just let him have some memorable fights and, yeah, make his money. But, yeah, I feel like I've talked forever. So I'm going to thank you guys for paying attention to this. What I am going to do, right, because this is the second time I've recorded this. So after this, I'm going to give you version 1, right? And I don't know which version was better. I feel more comfortable doing this one. I felt version 1 was forced. And I don't like putting stuff out as forced. It's rare that I keep outtakes. I normally just delete them and go, screw it. But I think it's valuable sometimes to know, even after God knows how many episodes, I still have to go, that ain't good enough. Do you know what I mean? And you'll see how long it is. It's not like I didn't put time into it. I put time into it, but it just didn't feel right. And I don't like putting stuff out that's not to a standard where people can listen and feel that they got value for money, although there's no money being exchanged. You know what I mean? So yeah, if anyone's interested in that, you're going to see there's more to come on this episode. For those who aren't, we shall speak again pretty soon, and the road to 400 continues.
When you get challenged by someone who's a guy like a Jake Paul, does that piss you off? Is it part of it that just like
no, it doesn't. I think it's awesome.
You think it's awesome?
Yeah, I think it pisses me off. I think it's cool.
You think it's cool? That's awesome. That's awesome that you handle it that way. Because like, in a way, I mean, it's kind of insulting. It's brave, it's bold of him, but it's like, Jesus Christ, there's levels to this world.
You can't define me. I define my work as a father. I'm many things, I'm many things. Yeah, I'm a convicted rapist. I'm a hell raiser. I'm a father, a loving father. I'm a semi-good husband. You know what I mean? What? I'm just a man out here trying to enjoy I was born poor. I ain't never had nothing, man. I don't know how to act, all right? But the real thing is, I'm just here to be me. I don't care what I am or who anyone thinks I am at this stage of my life. But yeah, I'm a pretty much a tyrant titan. Yeah, that's who I am.
Hello and welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport, where I think the Bosch army is done now. I think they've lost interest in the Rome football, so there'll be none of that Bosch nonsense anymore. Matchroom stable, absolutely in crisis, in the bin, 6 feet deep in the cemetery, and I can't even say I'm here for it. I'm happy for it. But look, karma comes and gets you eventually, doesn't it? Look, we can talk about how Johnny Fisher beats this Ivan Bazal, whatever his name is, yeah, on a Monte Carlo card that's normally where the dead weight goes, right? That's what Hearn does. But I think now that he's got his residency there, he's had to up his game a bit because there's a bit more scrutiny. So he's had to find some of his kind of fringe talent to put on there. That's why Johnny Fisher's on there. And look, the real question is, what's different from the Johnny Fisher that was under Mark Tibbs to the Johnny Fisher that's under Tony Sims? The answer is nothing. He's trying to do that wild Conor Benn style thing. You know how Conor does a little bouncing, start low, shoot up, spring up and swing. He's trying to do that. But here's the thing. Heavyweight's different, right? And we're going to talk about the fight in a second, but I want to frame this so people really understand. Heavyweight boxing is completely different. And you see, when I talk about heavyweights, I know Curtis is listening, and I know his ears have pricked up now. But my experience being around heavyweights, and I've worked with a lot of heavyweights, right? Big men being able to fight is an attitudinal thing. Because remember, most of the time, big guys don't get troubled. So they don't really know what it's like to have to scrap. Because they're big guys, they're normally the more physically dominant. So when you get a group of them in a room, it's very important that you believe you're the biggest dog in the yard. And if you ever watch Lennox Lewis, he's like that. When there's a photo of heavyweight boxers, Lennox will stand in the middle and dare someone to move him. Wilder's a bit like that. Usyk's like that in a more low-key way. But these are guys who are like, listen, I'm here because I belong. I dare you to prove me wrong. And then there are other heavyweights.
What is either though, man? Because it's not about doing something. Let's show some respect, stand in front of me.
I respect you, man. You just have to get
the belt.
It's not about the belt. I told you, don't stand there like you're gonna do something to me. I don't care about the belt. Man to man, show some respect. Stand in front of me like you're gonna do me something. You're not about that life. You're not about that life. You're not about that life. That's what I'm saying. Don't push up on me. Don't push up on me.
What more respect would you want?
Hand on my heart. Don't push up on me. You hear me? You hear me? Don't push up on me like that. No, I'm not an actor. Don't act. Don't act with me. I see through it. Yeah?
So that's what you get, right? When you're scared of other big men, you tend to act up like that. Joshua's always found it hard to be in the company of big men of his height and stature. He's all right when they're little guys, but when they're his size, he gets jumpy, he gets antsy because he doesn't know how to act. And that's what separates the guys who become heavyweight greats and dominate from the guys who don't. It's the attitude. It's not how much you train. It's not the calories you eat. It's not how much weight you can lift. It's in you or it isn't. And so here's where Matchroom's problem kicks in. You can't manufacture that toughness. You can navigate it like they did with Joshua. You can't manufacture it. You cannot bottle up and mass produce what Derek Chisora has. Derek Chisora is a dog because in any room he believes he's the biggest dog, and I think fair enough to him. Johnny Fisher's none of those things. He's not even a jumpy as hell Joshua. He's a nice kid, born to a nice family, grafting family, good working class family he's born into. He's done well. He's gone to university, got on the beers, played a bit of rugby, done a bit of white collar. Normal things a big kid will do early in their life, okay? Somehow out of nowhere, someone has said, mate, you should box professionally. Like it's a grad scheme job. Like you're just going to pop into, I don't know, Barclays Bank or Deloitte on a grad scheme and there's just loads of you. You're going to have japes for a couple of years before it gets serious. Johnny's finding out this is not a joke. What I think, and I'll stand on this, is that Dave Allen showed Johnny Fisher's nowhere near. It's not even about competence at this point. He's nowhere near man enough to be in with his peer group of heavyweights. He's not built that way. Johnny Fisher cannot get in with guys like Jamie TKV. He cannot get in with guys like David Adelaide because when they go head to head, these are the guys that Johnny would be scared of. These are the guys he'd have to go running to his old man, and his old man would have to go and get those Essex boys like your Lee Chapmans, etc. You know what I mean? Because his dad ain't doing nothing. So he has to go and get the old school guys to get stuck in. And so when you see what Dave Allen did to him, and like, let's be honest, Dave is British level. He made Johnny look like a child in there. And I knew Johnny wasn't built for this when he went and started palling up with Dave after the first fight, which he arguably lost, and started palling up with him, which is the ultimate act of submission, and big men should never submit. If you have to do that, you're not really a big man. In the same way, when I see Joshua going with Team Usyk, I'm like, you may as well retire at this point, because all the other heavyweights are looking at that going, yeah, you're not built for this. So you jump into the fight against Bazal, what is his name? Balaz, whatever his name was. And the fight starts. The guy doesn't look good. He doesn't look in shape. If you look at his record, he's basically fought a load of journeymen to pad out his record so he could get one of these paydays, right? Take his beating, go back, rinse and repeat. And when the next big British prospect comes, they'll make sure he's nicely warmed up and ready to go. So first round happens and Johnny Fisher's there. You can see Johnny Fisher is nervous, feels he's got a point to prove. They've essentially just found this guy on a building site somewhere and said, mate, do you want to box? And he's gone, yeah. And so Johnny sat about him. And the guy was like, no, man, let's see how tough you are. Just put one on him and Johnny's gone over. How that wasn't given a knockdown is beyond me. Yeah. This is what you call poor refereeing. And this is where I mean like hometown bias comes in, because the guy was down. And the ref was like, slip, push, which is ironic because later on in the fight, when Johnny Fisher gets his first knockdown and shoves the kid over, the rest like, that's a knockdown. So that lets you know that it's not the same rules here. So anyway, this is how you know Johnny was fucked, man. He got up and it looked like he was hitting a ruck. He's just gone straight in and just wrapped his arms around the guy and gone, mate, I don't know if I'm playing rugby or boxing right now. That's how good you got me. And he kept doing that, and the ref didn't take a point off. And the ref didn't take a point off. I don't even think he took a point off for the low blow, did he? And so you're looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, there isn't a worse heavyweight they could have given you to look good against. And you're looking terrible. Terrible. Second round, you're still like Bambi. Now you're scared to engage. And it's not till the fourth round that he gets his legs under him. And then we see the Conor Benn attack. Now, look, I get why Conor Benn does it. Because that's how his dad kind of boxed. With a bit more finesse, obviously. But that's how his dad boxed. So I see the logic. When I see Johnny Fisher doing it, number one, that's not going to get you through 12 rounds. You're not going to be able to do that for 12 rounds. And number two, if that is the only form of attack you have and you don't have good fundamentals, what are you going to do when people see those shots coming? What are you going to do against a Derek Chisora, who loves that? What are you going to do against him when he splatters you from one side of the ring to the other? I think there's a real risk of Johnny Fisher getting badly hurt if they move him up. In boxing, he should be called match with care. He should be the only professional boxer where you go match with care, which is what you normally do with someone when they want to fight, but you know the only way they'll ever really enjoy fighting is if they get in with someone who's just as bad as they are. So Johnny ends the fight in the fourth round, drops the guy a couple of times, and then that's really it. Told us absolutely nothing. The conclusion we can draw is it wasn't a Mark Tibbs problem. So when people say I was going at Mark Tibbs, listen, Mark Tibbs, it was not a Mark Tibbs problem. You probably taught him everything he needs to know. He ain't built for it. He ain't built for it. There's nothing Tony Simpson is going to be able to do for him. You know, people say the stuff Tony will give him. No comment. He's not heavy-handed enough to be a monster. He's not big enough to be a monster. He's like a middling heavyweight who doesn't know how to box as a middling heavyweight, just in terms of his dimensions. And so eventually he'll jump in with, I imagine he'll jump in with a Dave Allen or a Fraser Clark at some point, and they will do him again, and then he'll go the same for me. I think we've got another year of Johnny Fisher left, and he won't box again. I don't know what he'll do. He has a degree, so he might go into like sports marketing or whatever, man. He's a nice enough kid. I don't want anyone to read this as me not liking Johnny Fisher. I reckon he's a lovely kid. I reckon he's a credit to his family. I reckon he's done his dad proud. But in this thing called professional heavyweight boxing, he's so far out of his depth. So far. And they've fed him the softest line ever. Like, you look at what Fraser Clark's had to do to get in position. And look at what Johnny Fisher's had to do. Night and day. So I'll tell you this now. Yeah, all that bosh, all needs to stop now. All those guys in Essex, stop buying tickets. All that copper bosh talk, all that fat dude lying naked on billboards, all needs to stop. Yeah, Son ain't gonna do anything. And that's not a shot to him. He's just not that guy. He's not a heavyweight. He's a rugby player. Do you know what I mean? And he showed that, man. He was manhandling the guy in the ring. It was bad to see. He looked scared. And I don't know if you ever get that back. We saw with Joshua once he felt the fire, Joshua never wanted to feel that again. And that drove a lot of his decision making. He never wanted to feel that again. And I think Johnny Fisher's in the same position. So I don't know how you're going to match him. Like, how many Slovakian, stonemasons are you going to find for Johnny Fisher? Build up this crazy record, then say he's ready for a world title. He's not. He should do the right thing now. Use his 20s to go and make money in something he's good at. He is not good at this thing called boxing. And there isn't a trainer that's going to make him good at this thing called boxing. I don't think he takes it on board. Yeah, I don't. Does anyone remember the video clip? So there's a video clip of Anthony Joshua with Roberto Duran. And you know, like, Duran does his shtick of, here's how I used to block and work my magic on the inside. It's just like a magic trick at this point, isn't it? Where he just does it for the cameras. So anyway, he's just showing Joshua how to slip outside shots and just let your hands go, right? You know, slip and counter. Like, you teach this to 11-year-olds and they pick it up in like 2 minutes. I've never seen someone get it so wrong. Joshua just looked confused. Like, what is this you're showing me? What is this kung fu? And Johnny Fisher's a bit like that. I just don't think he retains stuff. I just don't. Which, you know, it makes you wonder, how did he get through his degree? But boxing-wise, he doesn't retain stuff. So he's going to get splattered at some point, and it's not going to be nice. And you'll have the voice of boxing, Adam Smith, crying into the microphone. Let's start pulling these potential car crashes out of boxing, and let's take it back to what it used to be, a sport for tough men and women, where you're really about it. That's what we need to get back to. And until we do, I don't think the public will take our sport seriously. And it definitely won't take our sport seriously if Johnny Fisher is the poster boy of the Bosh army. Do you know what I mean? It's not a good look for the sport. Can we talk about Elif Nur Turhan, because she's fast becoming my favorite boxer. Oh my God. I love everything about her. Oh my God. I thought when she fought Shauna Brown, I was like, lucky punch. Yeah, I hadn't really done my research on it. Like, I think she'd had a kind of a middling amateur career, boxed internationally, but nothing of any great renown. You know, she's one of those, I imagine she's one of those kill or be killed kind of fighters, right? Her style means she's either wiping you out or she's getting wiped out. And I love it. I am here for that. Like, I think that's a great advert for women's boxing, just a real gunslinger. And so she jumps in with Beatriz Ferreira, who's obviously the Olympian, and, you know, Hearn was trying to match her against Caroline Dubois, which would have just been carnage. I felt Dubois would have spanked her in the first instance, just because I think women's boxing's evolved past Beatriz Ferreira's generation into what we're seeing now with your Caroline Dubois, etc. But anyway, Beatriz jumps in with Elif Nur Turhan, and oh my God. Like, forget jabs. There's no jabs here. There's no jabs, there's no finesse, there's no footwork. It is just, I'm landing. And what she does really well is this idea I call following up. Most people, when they learn to box, it's one punch, out. Two punches, out. Three punches, out. That's it. That's what you're taught. You're just taught, in and out, son, in and out. There's no logic for it, by the way. It's taught because that's how people are taught. In and out, in and out, in and out. But what happens if your opponent is pulling back when you're pulling back? Do you see what I mean? You've now doubled the distance you got close. I love Elif Nur Turhan because she flips that around and she goes, well, what if I just follow up? Because I know you're anticipating the big right hand and you're likely going to try and counter the big right hand. So I'm going to follow up with a left hook. And she catches people napping. If your defense is weak, if your posture is weak, she'll catch you napping, which she did with Beatriz Ferreira a few times. And then Ferreira was watching out for the left hook because that's what dropped Shauna Brown. So Beatriz Ferreira was super focused on that initial follow-up hook, not realizing her right hand was going to follow afterwards. And it's that follow-up that kept catching her, because she'd be aware of the hook and she's like, I'm going to get mine in there first. And then as she's throwing her hook, there's a big right hand coming. So she got hit, I can't remember what round it was, when she got dropped and the ref didn't give the count. Let's just talk about the ref for a second. So number one, I'm happy that there's a female ref in a female fight. I think that's really important. If we're going to have women's boxing as a viable sport, let's have women's boxing as a viable sport, right? And I'd like to see more women participate and be involved at all levels of women's boxing. But can we at least make sure they're good? And I'm going to say why. So when the ref brings the fighters together to touch gloves, she goes into this monologue, like a real monologue, almost talking about, yeah, you know, you got to understand it's world peace. We're coming up to Christmas. You know, have you spoken to your loved ones? You know, call your friends, tell them you love them. And Diamante stood behind her, his arms cramping up. He's been holding that microphone for so long, and she makes this monologue. And David Diamante's just like, oh my God, can someone shut her up? So you know she's making this up off the top of her head because she's nervous, she's stumbling over her words, and you're like, just get on with it. And then she says touch gloves, and they don't touch gloves, right? So she's got no authority at this point because she can't even make them touch gloves. The other thing she does where I'm like, oh my God, is Turhan lands a decent right hand and drops Beatriz Ferreira, right? Referee's like, no, that's a slip. You're like, on what basis was that a slip? She went down due to a punch, right? So she gets her up, wipes the gloves, right? And Beatriz Ferreira's like, you know what? I probably could have done with the count. Beatriz Ferreira gets up, still dazed, gets hit with the same shot, hits the floor. Now the ref calls it a knockdown. And Ferreira's like, if you just called it a knockdown the first time, I would have been all right. I mean, like, you're costing me the fight here. Poor Beatriz Ferreira, like, not being helped by anybody in that ring. So the referee's had an absolute shocker. And so when we get to, this fight's not very long, by the way, right? Turhan just put the beating on Beatriz Ferreira. Just like, it was like a world star hip hop type beating. And I thought I was here for the 100%. But there's a point where she gets Beatriz Ferreira trapped in the corner off a big right hand and just tees off on Beatriz Ferreira, right? Ferreira's trapped in the corner. And I'm sure one of the punches has just turned her lights out and she's just pinned against this corner. The ref's not paying attention to Ferreira's eyes. Ferreira looks out. And basically the corner post is keeping her up. And so eventually Ferreira just was out cold after taking 4 punches she didn't need to take, slumps down, gets back up. Ref's counting. Like, at this point the fight should be over for Ferreira's own safety. Let her get some oxygen or something. And she's had an absolute shocker. He does the count and then stops the fight. Where, to be honest, that fight could have been stopped ages before. I just didn't get it. But look, big fan of Elif Nur Turhan. I will watch her fight anybody. I don't care. I will watch her fight anybody. Let her fight Katie Taylor. Let her fight Serrano. I will watch her fight anyone because someone's going to go. I don't know who, but someone is going to go. And if she can make that style stick, it's going to be interesting to see how many people just adopt that kill or be killed approach when it's only 2 minutes, because tiredness is less of a factor then. But I absolutely loved that fight. Absolutely loved every second of it. Love the fact that Turhan's trainer looked like Adam Booth. Someone's going to tell me there was Adam Booth. He looked the spit of Adam Booth. Like, if Adam Booth hasn't got him as a brother, I'll be massively surprised. What else happened? That happened in the world of boxing. So we had Shabazz Maverick Masood versus Peter McGrail. Now, I've never been convinced by McGrail. I just think McGrail's just one of those busy fighters, isn't he? A lot of red flags around what's going on in Liverpool, around, the Dr. Oz situation, etc. Dennis McCann popping, etc. Suspicions around other fighters in Liverpool that, the doping thing there seems to be an issue. But that's probably a conversation for another time. But I've never been convinced by McGrail. Wasn't convinced by him as an amateur. Like, he's one of those guys who's just fit, energetic, and busy, right? And much like Nick Ball, it's just throw loads of punches and see what happens. Shabazz Masood is almost the opposite. If he had kind of Nick Ball type power, he'd be an absolute nightmare for everyone. But as it is, he has to rely on superior movement and, great fundamentals and good technique. I think Shabazz Masood's a great fighter to watch. If you want to explain to someone what boxing looks like when, it's done technically well. But he's going to have a long career, man. He's going to eat a lot of shots in his career. And you wonder how many miles are on that clock already, because he doesn't do stoppages. It's always decisions. And he does get hit a fair bit, especially towards the end when his legs start to slow down. But in summary, look, he wins on points. With any highlights in the fight, a bit of pushing and shoving. It got a bit messy at times. McGrail loses a point for hitting around the back of the head. I thought Masood kind of played the referee on that one. But I wish we had more of that. Let's start deducting points for foul play, and people actually have to start, respecting the rules of the game. But yeah, and there was that fight. I don't think either guy goes anywhere because there's no one interesting in the division right now. To be making domestic fights with. Masood was calling out guys like Inoue, Nick Ball. I'm like, you might want to leave those guys alone. Like, you might want to leave those guys alone. It doesn't end well. And that's not me not liking him. It's just me knowing that the level he's winning at the moment isn't world level. Peter McGrail is not world level. Will never be world level. But you could move him up in weight and have some interesting fights with people. He's just not at the level. I wish I could be more insightful about that fight, but it was just one of those where you're like, get me to the end of it. is the simplest way I can describe that. Can we talk about Pat McCormack? I think we need to. Pat McCormack is probably the best amateur of his generation. So he's the generation before your Ben Whitakers, etc. Pat McCormack is of the same generation as like your Ted Cheesemans, maybe even your Josh Kellys. I'm not sure age-wise. I'd have to check age-wise. But think about this. He's the best amateur we've produced, like dominant, right? There's no question about it. You look at his record, Pat McCormack and his brother Luke, light years ahead of their peer group, light years ahead. Like you'd watch them at tournaments, clean up. There's almost no point in having anyone in the ring with them. But now think about this. Pat McCormack, Luke McCormack are the same generation as like Ted Cheeseman. And Ted had an amateur career, wore the vest, had a pro career, won some, lost some, made good money for his level, and stopped boxing. In all that time, Pat McCormack has got to this point where he's fighting Conor Walker. And if he did fight a returning Ted Cheeseman, I think he'd struggle. And so you look at that and you go, how have we ended up in this position? Because he got punched through the ropes against Conor Walker in a fight that, to be fair, he was seeing off, not handily, but handily enough. He was seeing the fight off. Like, he showed that he can box. And at this point, I know Curtis is now turning the volume up a bit. But no, Pat McCormack could box. But something in him from about round 9 started to unravel. I can't tell you what that is. But something started to unravel. And Conor Walker started to grind him down. And when you watch the fight, if you have, there was a point early in the fight where Conor Walker was just laughing at him, right? Just laughing, going, oh, this is the GB, the Olympic silver medalist. This guy? This is the best he's got? And I think that kind of lifted his spirits. And so he just kept plugging away. And Conor Walker gambled. And maybe Travis and Jamie Moore knew something. Travis was looking a lot like a young Rick Astley or younger Rick Astley. They're probably not that much different in age. Looking a bit Rick Astley-ish last night. But look, Conor Walker grinds him down. And there was a point in that last round, if you watch it back, where McCormack was going to spit the gum shield out. You see the white gum shield come out. And then he caught himself and went, nah, I'm going to get through to the end of the fight and win. Then it comes out. Ben Davison takes an age to clean it, put it back in. Gives McCormack the time he needs to recover. But it also gave Conor Walker an opportunity to recharge. And I actually think if McCormack doesn't spit the gum shield out, he gets through to the end of that fight. Because Walker looked like he'd punched himself out at that point. And then the delay just gave Walker a chance to chill in the neutral corner, probably take instruction. I think there's a point where he shouts out shit house to McCormack for spitting the gum shield out. But the corner basically can give him that advice. So, put your punches together. And then he comes back and he's punching differently. It's cleaner. He's just jab, little uppercut, straight over until he gets McCormack in the corner. He just punches him through the ropes. And at that point, I'm like, are they going to give McCormack more time to get back in the ring? The ref was like, nope, I'm going to count him. And I think Ben was like, mate, you're done. Like, it probably would have been unsafe for him to carry on. But you look at that and you go, that was the best product of GB. If you said, who are the best boxers to have come out of this building in Sheffield, he's in that list. And he couldn't handle Conor Walker. And look, whatever you want to say about Conor Walker's a guy who's viable at British level. I'm not going to disrespect him and say he's not. He's a guy that, will fight your Echo Estemans, etc. Pat McCormack was meant to be a guy who was levels above that. And it's turned out he's not. And why is that? Now, Curtis will tell you the amateur system doesn't deliver. My argument is actually Pat McCormack is evidence that the amateur system does deliver. It almost delivered too much. Because, like I said, you can watch Pat McCormack on silent and go, oh, he's good. He knows what he's doing. He can do all of it. Switch hit, he can move, he can do a load of things that are impressive. He's not tough, though. He's not like pro boxer tough. And that's from being in the system too long. If McCormack had pulled himself out that system about 7 years ago, I think he acquires that muscle memory for toughness. And that's what maybe that's the missing ingredient. Because I'm of the view that the way you develop fighters' toughness is from when they're young, they jump in with tough men. So, example, 10 years ago, almost to the day, I remember meeting Stevie Broughton, who used to work with Shane McGuigan at the time. And I had a list of fighters, and I wanted to get sparring with their guys for that exact reason. Because the sparring we were doing in the gym was intense, but it wasn't pro boxer level sparring. And they had to know what that felt like so that their bodies could adapt physically. And so over the next 2 and a bit years, that's all we did. We just showed up, took those hard rounds. I remember one of my lads, Ola, jumping in with like a Conrad Cummings and realizing the difference, right? You're getting hit harder. And Conrad Cummings, I know people say he didn't have the greatest career, but he was a tough man. And those sorts of things. Dudes getting rounds with Josh Taylor, etc. George Groves. I remember Ola doing some great work with George and learning what that gap in power is. But once you build that muscle memory for toughness, it takes you through. It's the same in any sport. The sooner you play with grown men and adapt to it, the tougher you're going to be when it's your time to step forward. And I think the problem with GB is you never really make that move. You spar a lot of people who are just like you, and so your body adapts to that level. It doesn't give you the added hardness. And so when McCormack turned over, having spent all those years in GB, he was callow. The word you can use is hollow as well. He didn't have that raw toughness that someone like a Conor Walker does. Conor Walker has it, and you can see that because he's had to come up a different route. And so this comes down to how do you build boxers that can go the distance? How do you build boxers that can do the doing? How do you pull that together? Which is a more interesting question. So how do you do that? And it comes back to Fraser Clark versus Jamie TKV. 2 very different pathways, 2 very different systems. Jamie did everything he could to try and get in to that kind of elite amateur system through the Africa route, but it wasn't to be. But in the meantime, what Jamie was doing was accumulating rounds on top of rounds on top of rounds in good camps, etc. Like Fabio Wardley did. I think all the best boxers get out their comfort zone and go and do those hard rounds. Whether you go the traditional route, whether you go the experimental route, whichever route you go through, you need a lot of rounds against tough people to know what that level is like, because then it's not a surprise to you, which it seems to be for a lot of these GB guys. They're almost surprised that there are people tougher than them that can outlast them. And it's maybe a bit of arrogance to think that you can just come out of GB and you're going to be the best in the country. It's not turning out to be the case. And so do you then say, because I think, look, at some point Curtis and I will have the debate out in public, not even in a bad way, like respectfully, because I quite like a lot of what he says. And, you know, he believes I bat for the system, which I don't really, but I understand we need a system of some sort. And I don't think we've got it right, because we've got a lot of issues in the amateurs thing, and I've complained about this a lot, so I'm not going to complain this time. I'm going to tell you, here's what I would do. I would start tiering the amateur clubs, level 3, level 2, level 1. Level 3 clubs should be your community clubs. Kids come in, train, whatever. You take them out to the Haringey, you know, they feel good about themselves. But these are clubs you wouldn't expect to find national champions in, right? Just level 3 community clubs, lovely places, an important part of the ecosystem. It's where some kids will discover boxing. So they should be your tier 3, level 3 clubs, whatever you want to call it. Your tier 2s should be clubs like, I'll give an example here, like a South Norwood and Victory. They produce champions when there's a fair wind and the right person walks through the door. They've got good coaches, so they can, if they've got the right raw materials, they will produce champions, right? That's your South Norwood and Victory. You know, if you look at modern clubs, TM would be an example. M31 are having a moment up in Manchester. Jennings Gym as well. There's a few clubs that I'd put at like that kind of level 2 or tier 2. And then you got your tier 1 clubs. Your tier 1 clubs to me are things like Pinewood Star. Yeah? Every year there are medals. Repton, West Ham. They'd be my tier 1s. Your Rotundas, Bertley. Where you look at people who have won things and they're there. Empire's another example. Maybe Empire might be tier 2. But your tier 1 clubs, and every 5 years this should be reviewed in my opinion. You can move up, you can move down. But I think we need to start doing that, because what will start to happen is people who want to win stuff. So for me, tier 3s shouldn't be able to enter any tournaments. Like they should be able to do box cups and novices, and that's it. They shouldn't be in things like the national championships for the schoolboys. For me, the community clubs, that's what they should be for, funneling people up that ladder, right? Your tier 2s should be able to enter tournaments and stuff, but they can't just put anyone in. And then your tier 1 clubs, they're the guys who you expect to win the tournament, so they'll be in. Once you start doing that, what do you think kids are going to do? Kids are going to be like, I need to go and prove myself at a tier 2 or a tier 1 club. And there'll be some guys you just move down, right? You go, look, I don't want the pressure of having to train 2 or 3 times a week at this level, and you shuffle down the ladder. What that will do, and I'm going to use London as an example, but this will be true in other cities as well. It will force clubs to have 4 or 5 guys in each weight class, these tier 1, who are good enough. So the sparring is always at a certain level. And then when you start doing the inter-club sparring, it should take things up a notch or 2. Until we concentrate the talent in the right places and the right coaches, and that's an important part of it, we're not going to fix this. So we need to raise the level of what we produce in the system. And then once we do that, get them out fighting these tough men in the pros. Just get them out sparring, training with them, and understanding where that level is. And we haven't got that right yet. So hopefully we can get that right. Because, and I want to preempt Curtis's message. We need something that is scalable. So we need something that provides good fundamental coaching and lots of opportunity to acquire competitive rounds. Those 2 things have to be in place for whatever system you devise. And it has to be scalable. Like, I can train someone and I can spend 5 days a week driving them up and down the country to spar. I can do that. It's expensive and it's hard to scale that, because once I've got 5 fighters in different weight classes, it's problematic. So you need a system. Whatever you want to call it, you need some kind of system. The GB system doesn't work. McCormack's shown that. Fraser Clark's shown that. All the guys, McGrail showed that. Cordina's now showing that. Kesh Ashfaq showed that. Josh Kelly showed that. It doesn't work. For top level boxing, it doesn't work. These GB guys are getting bypassed by people who just have the grit, toughness, and fitness to do a fair bit of damage. But just bringing it all the way back around to Pat McCormack, I don't know what you do with him now. Like, you've got to whack him in with a guy like Echo Esserman and go, mate, let's just see if you've got anything. Anything. Because you would have met Echo Esserman in your amateur journey. Yeah, you at some point, you guys would have butted heads. So it's not going to be an unknown quantity for you. So let's see what you can do. As for Conor Walker, who do you put him in with? That's the real question. Who do you put Conor Walker in with? Because he can out-tough someone like a Pat McCormack, but there's dudes that he can't out-tough. Yeah, you can't out-tough an Echo Esserman, for example. And so what does he do? Regardless of what he does, I do think he'll be an entertaining fight whichever way he goes. And I am happy for him because, wow. He's basically booted up the chessboard, right? He's basically said, Hearn, here's one of your blue chip prospects. Mangled. Do with the remains as you wish. My work here is done. Which is crazy for me. So, in terms of McCormack, don't know what you do with him, but that's kind of over. Same with his brother. All that nonsense in GB's caught up to them. They all got fat and comfortable off the money and the trips and the sponsorships and the bad behavior in Sheffield that got overlooked by everyone because they were the golden siblings. Do you know what I mean? Everyone overlooked all the behavior, but it's all caught up to them now. There's only so long you can disrespect your talent before you realize the window's closed. So I don't know how you describe that Monaco show. Like it looks like a lot of scorched earth for Eddie. But I think he sacrificed all the people he wasn't sure about. I think he was done with the Beatrice Ferreira experiment, and so he's found a way to wash his hands off her. So she's probably on the outside looking in. Johnny Fisher gets to fight another day, but his next defeat will see him on the outside looking in. McCormack outside looking in, McGrail on the outside looking in, because Hearn doesn't care about these guys. Then all this talk of, McGrail ain't headlining nothing in Liverpool. McCormack's not headlining anything in Newcastle. Like there's no investment case for those guys. So they're now on the outside looking in. It's very, very smart what he's doing. He's just pruning his stable slowly but surely, getting rid of all the deadwood. Because all Hearn really wants to do, in my opinion, is be a mouthpiece. And this doesn't get talked about a lot because Jaro Pataya boxed as well this weekend, which Hearn was very quiet about. But Pataya smashed Sin Cara to pieces, wiped him out, man. Like nastily as well, nasty work. But their team are like, yo, we ain't got no dealings with Hearn. And I'm like, that's a blue chip prospect right there. Like if you're the global promoter, if you're the guy, you should be promoting Jaro Pataya instead of just offering him slots on a card you need to fill. And I think this is what's happening in boxing. I think the exposure of Eddie Hearn is real now. You got Benjamin Shalom just sticking it on him, speaking facts. Hearn's trying to clap back, but he can't, even with his little numpty media crew. Like, why was it only IFL and Stomping Ground that were invited to Monaco to do coverage? IFL, just because I think Hearn's got money in them, it'd be my opinion. And Stomping Ground, because my opinion is Stomping Ground is a brand that is owned by Matchroom, and Charlie Parsons is essentially in-house media. As much as he doesn't want to admit it, he's in-house media. Because I'm like, what are you at Stomping Ground? Like, where's your directorship? Do you know what I mean? Show us, man. Show us the shareholding. He's there in his little Stone Island, whatever, looking at Benny Banks. Just like, look at me living the life. And look, I can't be mad at him. I just pray that this isn't a grooming scandal. I pray we don't find out that this guy has been groomed since he was 18 and we find these DMs between him and whoever. That would be very distressing for me to find out. But look, that's what they do. They groom these young kids and these brainless guys like Oscar Beavis, whatever his name is. The kind of headbangers. They find these guys that they can manipulate and say, look, just do what we ask you to do and we'll look after you. And look, and I know this because they've tried to have the chat with me in the past. Like they said, look, if you just toned down what you were saying, if you just try to be a little nicer to Eddie, we can get you in somewhere, right? They've tried all of that. Maybe that's why Coogan and I fell out. Maybe because I wouldn't jump on the plantation like he managed to convince Tebbit to do and all those other idiots. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's why he routinely tried to embarrass the New Age boys, because we were three guys who made something that he couldn't control. And everyone listened. That's the thing people forget. Everybody listened. And so he hated that. He thought, yeah, okay, we'll get them to do some commentary here. We'll get them on board. They'll become one of us. And we were like, we'll never be one of anyone. We're just one of ourselves. And so that's when he tried the embarrassing Martin in front of Eddie Hearn thing. That's when he tried to embarrass me by leaking that video that he said he'd never release of me and Denzel doing the interview. People forget that story. Like, that wasn't meant to go out. That was designed to embarrass me, and it backfired because people went, I could have a beer with him. My follower count went up after that. So that didn't work for him. But I'm glad to have given him whatever 3,500, 4,000 views, man. They send me a check. But I always remember that because that wasn't meant to go out because he didn't even film it. If you actually see, like, he's just floating around, and it's Isaac Chamberlain filming, and it's me and Denzel in front of the camera just larking around. We didn't even know if there was a memory card in there, and that's why it got released ages after the event, because IFL released stuff the day after, right? This got released ages after, when it's like, yeah, let's put this out there to embarrass him, and it backfired. But that's the sort of guy you're dealing with. When people say, oh, Coogan's all right, that's the guy you're dealing with. That's the guy you're dealing with. So when you say, why am I a bit off with guys? I don't trust people like that. If he had messaged me and said, I'm going to put that video out, I know you're a bit drunk, but it might do numbers for me, I might have said, mate, do your thing. But he was sneaky about it. And then he ran around trying to ask questions like Tebbit did, trying to get dirt on me. Oh, he must have done something foul in boxing. There must be some scandal. Nah, there isn't. There isn't. But Hearn basically takes his favored soldiers with him so he can do all the little fluff pieces. He can do all his clapbacks at Ben Shalom, etc., without anyone challenging him. Yeah. And that's not just his money paying for it. Remember, that's your money. That's your subscription money. That's you being forced to watch adverts for this nonsense. So do the right thing and stop watching it. Yeah? Stop watching it. And maybe someone should ask some questions around why Hearn said, he treated Opatar like he was his little brother and stuff, and now he's abandoned him. There's no let's make fights happen. There's none of that. And so now Jai's just having to hustle his own way. Do you know what I mean? Which is a real shame, because he's a good talent who maybe now needs to move up. I don't get it. What else was we going to talk about? It's going to be really interesting, actually. Let me just close this by saying this. If KSI moves Misfits into pro boxing, which it looks like he's doing with Vidal Riley, I think this is going to be really interesting. And the reason it's going to be really interesting is this. KSI brings a fan base that's not boxing related. KSI brings a fan base that doesn't want anything to do with hardcore boxing. Nothing. They do not want anything. And if he can build a proposition where he completely ignores hardcores. Look, love Russ to bits, but you got to ignore guys like Russ if you're KSI. And you got to build a boxing product for people who know nothing about boxing. That's what you're building. If he falls into the trap of trying to appeal to boxing fans, it will go wrong. But he's been smart enough not to do that. And I'd like to see what he does, because his following exists independently of boxing. So he's almost the guy that brings boxing to his fan base. And if he can do that, I think he moves to being the platform of choice. If I was a pro boxer now, and you said you can sign with KSI, Ben Shalom, Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, I might go with KSI. If you look at the Andrew Tate, is it Chase Demore? If you look at their build-up, that's been a lot better than anything I've seen on the pro side. Look, they've even got, what's the lady? Carla Jade. They got Carla Jade doing stuff that's getting traction, and we don't do that with our women boxers. So they don't need us. We need them. It's a hard thing to admit, but we need them. But KSI will do well to avoid boxing hardcores. He'd do well to avoid that because he doesn't need it. When people see how much money is being made on that side, they will run to him. And if he pulls this off, that's a power move. Because what can Hearn do? Nothing. Hearn can't outreach KSI. Can't outtalk KSI. Can't outmoney KSI. I mean, that Prime money was stupid. Hearn doesn't have the money those guys made off Prime. So I wish them all the best, man. I love that movement. Listen, guys, if there's a role for me, you know what I mean, hit my DMs. I'm all for being involved in that, because that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. But look, let me tap out. I should do an episode about what's going on in the news, like where I just respond to interviews and nonsense. But I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm tempted. So just watch this space. If it might never come out, by the way, but if it does come out, this is the genesis of it. It's just popped into my head now, but it might not if I can't make it work. But listen, guys, enjoy the episode and have a great rest of the week. Get your Christmas shopping done. If you go buy Christmas cards and send them, this is the week to do everything. If you go catch up with friends, do it this week, because from next week everything's just going to get manic.